Hello everyone, it's me Tom again with another massive tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at something that's a little bit simpler than the last couple of sounds that I've tried to demonstrate. So it shouldn't be too hard to follow along, and I think there's a lot of room for kind of expanding the sound. So stick with me, hopefully this shouldn't take too long. We'll just take a quick listen to it in isolation so you can be sure you want to make it. This is where the detune starts to build up. As you can see, there's quite a few lanes of automation here for the different macro controls. Okay, so it's very basic. You see lots of basic wave shapes here. If you want to avoid listening to my boring rambling, I do not blame you at all. There should be some buttons available so you can just literally skip in and look at these different settings. If you're more kind and patient, then I will show you and talk you through my process. So here we are with a blank massive patch and a spectrum, just so you can kind of see what's going on as I do it here. Now we'll start with the oscillators as always. This is very basic, so I'm going to just dial this more towards the square here. It's going to make very little difference, and we want this a square wave. I'm going to dial back the intensity on this a little bit and just move the amplitudes to about here, and finally we'll pitch it down 5 cents, and that's actually the oscillator settings done. So that's what we're left with. We'll move on to the feedback now, and I've actually used an LFO to modulate the feedback about this much, and the LFO settings are dead simple, just a bit more rate here and dial back the amplitude. We want a full 2 curve, and we'll just put the X fade around here. So this kind of gives us, I don't know, I like having a sine to support my main curve sometimes, just because it can kind of exaggerate the drop a little bit. That's how I imagine it. It's very kind of pseudo sciencey, I guess, because anyway. So moving on, we'll look at the filter now. There's just one, so we want to set this mix to 1, and it's just this one low pass filter. We'll dial up the cutoff to about here, and we're going to set up a macro control for the resonance. So we'll just name this quickly. Beautiful. I'm so creative with my names. Put this to about halfway, so you can kind of see it. If I just, there you go, around there, because obviously resonance exaggerates our filter cutoff frequency, so we want the cutoff to about here. That's the filter done. We'll move on to the voicing section now. We want 4 voices, and we'll set it to monophonic just because we want these notes to keep separate. It's very loud. Okay, so we'll do this detune while we're here. But I do want to talk about the MIDI. So, as mentioned in my last video, I keep these detune macro controls kind of limited so that when I'm looking at my automation, I can set it to extremes, because if I had this all the way up, I'd never use that in the song. It's way too much. So dial it back here, and then when I come to my project, a day later or even a few hours later, I can look at it and think, oh, okay, I've set up the detune to be quite intense there, so I want that to be an intense moment for the synth. So that's it for the voicing tab. So the MIDI that I want to talk about, it's just a sequence in D here and 16th notes. I haven't even played around with the velocity, which you definitely could do for a kind of bouncing effect, if you want to map some controls of the velocity in the envelope. But the reason I set it in mono is so that those notes didn't cross over. Pretty simple logic. We'll look at this ADSR envelope now. We don't want any sustain. We're going to dial back the decay a little bit to really get that plunky kind of effect going on, and we'll set the attack to absolute 0. If you wanted, you could dial up that velocity, but shamefully I didn't. And with the decay, I think I might actually set a macro control for this, because you can hear it's kind of similar to what I did in my last startup. It's quite a nice effect to have on there. We'll move on to look at this bit crush that I've added on here. I've set that to just under half on the dry wet and full crush. And you can hear that really adds a lot to the high end of the sound. I think you could go all the way in there. That's not too extreme. That's not too bad. But just for the sound I was going for, it's just kind of soft. I didn't want to commit fully to that. Next up, we'll look at the effects section. This is actually the last thing on the list. I've dialed in a control here for the two effects. First up is this reverb, and I've set that to about halfway there, you can see, because I always want to have more dry than wet. I dialed up the colour quite a bit here, down the size and down the density a little bit. And I added a delay synced. Again, same kind of idea here, just under halfway with the dry wet. Dial back the damp and dial back the feedback a bit, especially the feedback here, like it's kind of weird. You've got loads of notes delaying, and then like, as you can see, I'll have it playing around a lot. You can still hear the notes echoing around if you've got higher feedback from ages ago, which is, I felt was kind of weird. That's what I mean. So, that's what I did. And these controls are nice, you know, they're not only do they work in automation, but also if you want to jump in and mix your sound really easily, just dialing those back a bit is definitely nice. So that is actually it for the synth. Very brief, as I said. Lots of room to build on it yourself. You know, the wave shapes themselves are very basic. There's a lot of kind of, you know, there's another oscillator slot for you to dial in there, and I haven't used the modulation oscillator, which you totally could as well. Yeah, that should be on. Okay, yeah, there you go. So if you're not familiar with the modulation oscillator, definitely go into the manual and check that out, because it's very interesting and kind of sciencey, but really at the end of the day, you're just kind of plugging in settings, which is the most fun way of doing things in my point of view. That is pretty much it for our video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.